calling the next witness, Dr. Ernest Kinoshi.
Of course, it always helps, counsel, to have the witness in position by the time you call me, isn't it?
I do apologize, Justice. I was under the impression that that arrangement has been made. I had spoken to the
Witness
witness.
should be here, and that's true of all counsel. When you call me, the witness must be seated so that we can get on with it. Mr. Kinoshi, please do take a seat. You are most welcome. There is a mic in front of you. There's a little obvious on and off button. I suggest you keep your button on throughout your evidence.
Thank you, Justice.
It's just more convenient. We're going to ask that your evidence be given under oath. And there are two forms that you could take, an affirmation or a conventional oath, which ends up with "so help me God." What is your choice?
I'll take the conventional oath, Justice.
Yes. In that event, the evidence you're about to give must be the truth and nothing but the truth. And if it is so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you. Counsel?
Thank you, Justice. Dr. Kinoshi, may you please, for the record, state your full names?
Counsel, my full names are Ernest Kinoshi, Kenoshi. That's the name.
Thank you. Can you indicate where are you currently employed?
I am currently employed as the acting head of department in Gauteng Department of Health.
Since when have you been on the position?
Well, I was seconded from my substantive appointment at Steve Biko Academic Hospital as Chief Executive Officer and seconded to this post of acting head of department on the 8th of February 2017.
Dr. Kinoshi, there is a bundle of documents before you, which is file number 1. If you may proceed, if you get to page 1, Indeed. You will note that it is a report from the Office of the Ombudsman. Are you familiar with the document?
Councillor, I am familiar with the document.
That is the document which details the findings of the Office of the Ombudsman and also the recommendations which have been made and which had to be attended to or addressed by the officials responsible. There's been evidence for the past days, and some of the issues have been deferred to you as the acting head of the Gauteng Department of Health. I just want to give an indication that there are people before you who are family members of those who have been affected by the events which have been detailed in the report. And the nation is also of concern with regard to those findings. We have requested your assistance before these proceedings so that you can give an explanation of the steps that the government has taken in order to address the issues which have been raised by the Ombud. And in that regard, we need to emphasize that there are two issues which the families, the nation, as well as the whole world would like to know, that pursuant to the report, has there been any consequences to those officials who have been fingered by the Office of the Ombudsman for their culpable conduct which resulted in the tragic event? And the second aspect that we would like you to assist relates to what remedial steps has the government taken in order to ensure that compliance with the recommendation is given effect to. And that should be a demonstration on the part of the government about its intention to ensure that the recommendations are fully implemented. As I have indicated to you, I'll only refer you to those aspects which have been deferred to you to deal with. And in that regard, if you can find a document which details the report on the implementation, the document should be on your left. It is. Dr. Kinoshi, I'll take you straight to point number 6 of the report, which is page 2. As I have indicated, the nation has been waiting with eagerness to find out exactly if there has been consequences on those officials that the Ombudsman had identified as the officials responsible for the tragic events.
Well, at some point, you'd have to put a question to the witness.
Indeed.
To allow Dr.
Yes,
Kinoshi
yes.
to respond.
With regard to recommendation number 6, you will note that the Ombudsman has recommended that corrective disciplinary action must be taken against members of the Gauteng Department of Mental Health, Ms. S. Mashile, who is the Deputy Director, Mr. F. Tobani, Deputy Director, Ms. H. Jacobus, Deputy Director, Ms. S. Sinelo, Deputy Director, Dr. S. Lenkwani, Deputy Director, Mr. M. Pizi, Chief Director, Ms. D. Masondo, Chair of the Mental Health Review Board, Ms. M. Nyatlo, Chief Executive Officer of the Cullinan Care Rehabilitation Center, and Ms. M. Malaza, Acting CEO, the Chief Executive Officer of Cullinan Care Rehabilitation Center, in compliance with the disciplinary code and procedures applicable to them for failing to exercise their fiduciary duties and responsibilities. They allowed fear to cloud and override their fiduciary responsibilities and thus failed to report this matter earlier to relevant authorities. Fiduciary responsibility is essential for good corporate governance. With regard to the recommendation that I have just put on record, can you just inform everyone as to what appropriate steps has been taken by the government against these officials who have been identified by the Ombudsman?
Thank you, Council. Indeed, action was taken during the months of...
Dr. Kinosi, I suggest that when you do give your reply, straight in front of you or to your left.
Okay.
Council asks the questions, but the answers go to
the court.
To the court and everybody who sits here to listen.
Okay.
You don't have to strain your neck, but it's good to go straight in front of you.
Thank you very much, Justice. Action has been taken against all the 9 members mentioned in recommendation number 6 of the Health Ombud. And I will detail it as follows. An investigating officer was appointed to investigate the issues around Ms. Maile, Mr. Tobani, Ms. Jacobs, Ms. Sinelo, Dr. Lenkwani, Ms. Malaza, and Ms. Nyatlo, and Mr. Pizi. I'll come to Ms. Masondo after this. The cases against and a presiding officer was also appointed for all these matters. The disciplinary cases of of the following 5 have been finalized, and that's Ms. Mashile, Mr. Tobani, Ms. H. Jacobus, Ms. S. Sinelo, and Dr. Lenkwani, and Ms. M. Malaza. And the finding of the presiding officer in their disciplinary cases was that they are indeed guilty of the allegations mentioned by the Ombudsman, and that the sanction given was that they should be given final written warning letters, and that they should receive counseling on their responsibilities. This sanction has been issued to them by their immediate supervisor, the acting director of mental health care services. The disciplinary case against Ms. M. Nyatlo, who was the CEO, or is still the suspended CEO of Cullinan Care and Rehab Center, is still pending because the case had to be postponed on numerous times due to her ill health. The case against Mr. Pizi was halted when Mr. Mr. Pitsi lodged an appeal during the month of March against the findings and recommendations of the Health Ombud. And his case was handled by the tribunal appointed by the Minister of Health, Dr. Motsoaledi. The case against the chairperson of the Mental Health Review Board, or Ms. D. Masondo.
Dr. Kinoshi, if I can just take you back before you get to Ms. Masondo, can you just indicate what is the status with regard to, you have mentioned that the sanctions has been given against the officials who were supposed to be, who were given written warning.
Yes.
Can you just elaborate with that regard as to exactly what is the status of those sanctions, whether have they been implemented or what is the position?
The sanctions of a final written warning and counseling have indeed been implemented by their immediate supervisor, the current immediate supervisor for the 5 who are at head office. And the same has happened for Ms. Malaza, who is actually is a substantive appointment, is at best copies as an assistant nursing manager. But she, as you remember, acted subsequently in around about August last year as acting CEO of Cullinan Care and Rehab Center as well. So they have been given final written warning letters, but the government has felt that the sanctions may be too lenient, and the government has, the department has is in the process of applying for review of the sanctions.
What were the substantive charges against them?
Justice, the charges were as stated in the recommendation number 6, that is for failing to exercise their fiduciary duties and responsibilities due to what they had claimed is fear. So and that those were the substantive charges against them in performing their duties as deputy directors in the mental health care services.
In other words, okay, let's put it this way. Was it specified what fiduciary duties did they fail to fulfill on account of fear?
Yes, Justice. I don't have a copy of the charge sheet in front of me at the moment, but the charge sheet did detail what they were supposed to have done as managers, middle managers in the mental health services of the department, and also their responsibilities to our mental health care users.
You see, think about clinicians who were required to ensure that bed letters and or necessary medical information is transferred from Esidimeni to any of the NGOs, of the 27 NGOs. Were some of these directors in that category, for instance?
Justice, not exactly. For the ombudsman to reach this recommendation, I think he took it from the interviews that he had with each one of these during his period of investigation, and in the records, in the ombudsman's report and findings, he states exactly what these managers said to him, that even when they saw that things were going the wrong direction, they couldn't correct them because of fear they had of their superiors. And matters continued the way they went, despite them being there. So they put that down to the fear of their superiors. And that's what the judge is saying, that they let their fear overrule what they knew, what is correct. And that's what they were charged with.
You see, there must always be a relationship between the omission or commission on the one side,
Yes.
and punishment on the other. Fear is not a substantive thing in itself. It's something that prevents you from doing your duty.
Yes.
So it's important, I think, in assessing for one to know what duties did they fail to do besides saying we were afraid. I'm looking at, and I will scroll it now, I'm looking at the interview section of the report. And that might help to tell us what the exact omissions or commissions on their part were as a result of fear. And one way of dealing with that, of course, would be to get copies of the charge sheet. Could those be readily available?
Those would be readily available, Justice, and we can submit them during the course of the day.
Yeah, that's good enough. Counsel, will you arrange with the witness that we get copies of the charge sheet?
Indeed so,
in
Justice.
each of the cases. Sure, thank you. You may proceed, thank you. You were about to move over to Ms. Masondo, I think.
The witness was still giving detail of the steps taken to have the sanctions reviewed before the Labour Court. If you can just complete on that aspect.
Yes.
Yes. The sanctions given to the 6, it is the 5 deputy directors and Ms. Malaza, who's stationed in West Office, are in the process of being referred for review after we, as a department, have obtained legal opinion on that.
Has the state a view of what the appropriate punishment ought to have been?
I think, Justice, the state would not want to preempt the findings of any presiding officer. But the state wants to make sure that the sanctions given are appropriate.
And are all of them back at work?
All of them are back at work, Justice.
You may then proceed to give detail of the consequence which followed on Ms. Masondo upon being pointed by the Ombudsman.
In the case of Ms. Masondo, in accordance with the Mental Health Care Act, the section that deals with Mental Health Review Board, an inquiry was established. She was immediately suspended by the MEC of the Department of Health, Dr. Gwen Ramokopa, and an inquiry was set up headed by a senior counsel. During her testimony in the inquiry, she also mentioned that she was not acting alone. There were 12 other Mental Health Review Board members, and they also, an inquiry was also set up, a second inquiry to also address the remaining members of the board. So in effect, the board was in effect dissolved by the MEC of Health, the board as it existed at the time. The senior counsel who was appointed to preside over the inquiry has only recently presented his finding, and he has found Ms. Masondo to be not guilty, in effect, if I may use that word loosely, to be innocent. Again, the department is taking that sanction for review.
Again, in this case, can we get a copy of the charge sheet against Ms. Masondo?
Justice, we will do that.
Thank you.
Can you just clarify what steps were taken against those members that Ms. Masondo has indicated that she was not acting alone in the execution of her duties in the board?
Justice, the inquiries set up in the case of the rest of the members of the Mental Health Care Review Board is not over yet, so we are still awaiting the outcome from the presiding officer.
Dr. Kinoshi, let's move on to recommendation number 8. It records that the Ombudsman fully supports the ongoing South African Police Service and forensic investigation underway. The findings and outcomes of these investigations must be shared with appropriate agencies so that appropriate action, where deemed justified, can be taken. If you may turn to page 4 of that report, can you please just assist to give an explanation relating to the status insofar as the case dockets which has been opened? It is already before these proceedings that the recorded number of the people who have passed on is standing at 118. Can you just give an indication why is there such a number of the dockets, number of 35 dockets, in relation to the actual number of deaths?
Justice, there are the department has indeed been working with the SAPS and also with the National Prosecuting Authority. They have requested all copies of all clinical records of patients that we have in our possession. And the department has cooperated and handed these over to the SAPS and to the NPA. The SAPS have opened 35 dockets as stated in records, and over and above, they've opened 76 inquiries in investigating the death. So there's 76 inquiries and 35 dockets. I should also state that the remaining 7, unfortunately, Justice, the remaining 7, if you add those, it will be 111. The remaining 7 are cases which are also in the hands of the SAPS of former life Esidimeni patients who have not been claimed, whose bodies have not been claimed, and are unfortunately still lying in our mortuaries. If you add those, it will come to 111. Just this. 118. 118.
The status report records that there is 26 post-mortem reports which have been finalized. Can you give an account as to what happened with regard to the rest of the death which has occurred? Whether has there been any post-mortem reports provided?
Justice, indeed, 26 autopsies, post-mortems have been performed on those who are deceased. The reports are with the SAPS, as should happen with the law. So the reports are, by law, handed to SAPS by forensic pathologists, and the reports are with in the possession of the SAPS. The department is not in possession of the reports, and I'm not sure, Council, what was the rest of your question?
Yes. I just wanted to get an indication as to why only 26 post-mortem reports if the deaths has been recorded at 118.
Justice, yeah, this is so because most of the deaths happened before the whole number of the deaths of our patients became public matter, and even before the Health Ombudsman released his report on the 1st of February 2017. So the postmortems were done maybe in the latter part, when the matter was already in the public space, and when the Ombudsman had started investigating the matter after his appointment in October 2016. And so most of those that happened after that were there were autopsies, but deaths that happened earlier in 2016, in the early months and the middle months of 2016, and they happened some in some in NGOs, others in government institutions, were not autopsied, and I think it is up to this process, I suppose, to decide what would happen in those cases, and of course the SAPS as well.
We're not autopsied means,
We're not
doctor, that they were buried without any pathological examination.
Yes, Justice.
A few questions pop up. One, do we know where they are buried? In other words, 118 less 26. Do we know where exactly they are buried?
Justice, we have been working hard since our appointment early this year to do exactly that, and we do know where all 111 are buried. As I have indicated, 7 of them still remain in our mortuaries.
Now, I'm thinking of the schedule that the Ombudsman gave us when he came to testify. The places of burial appear on that schedule. Let's look. In other words, part of closure is to know where the remains are. It's a very vital part of closure, isn't it? I'm looking at the schedule. I don't know if you have one available to you, Dr. Kinosi.
Not in, oh, I've got it, yes, but it's in the print.
This
It's
is
such
how
that
it
I won't be
looks
able
like.
to
I
read
can
it.
ask one of my support staff to give it to you,
Okay.
or council to give it, to lend you a copy.
Thank you.
If you look at that spreadsheet, it was given to us. It obviously has quite a lot of detail about the deceased. And the
Yes.
details appear in the very first row at the top.
Yes, Justice.
Place of death, I see. Provisional type of death, obviously subject to post-mortem. I don't see place of burial.
The place of burial on this one, Justice, is not shown. Some of them, because they happened long before these investigations, we
Yes.
had to work with Home Affairs. We had to work with the various institutions where they had been housed, and we also had to work with undertakers as well. So we did interact with quite a number of funeral undertakers in this process. And it is, I agree, Justice, that it would be important to state where each one of them is buried, and that can be provided, all those that we know.
Wonderful, Dr. Kenoshi. Shall we again, council? We need copies of the schedule that sets out places of burial. Particularly if the burial was not done by family. But we need that schedule so that when it becomes necessary, at the end, I can be able to say, and families can know where to go and look and say, they lived, they died, and this is where they are resting.
Indeed, so Justice, that will be arranged.
Yeah, that will be arranged. Thank you. You may proceed, council. But before you do, again, going back to the schedule, just like you know, they said you know all about the details. On that list, you can see provisional type of death. And the bulk is described as natural causes. Why would that be so?
Justice, most of them we could find a copy of a death certificate, and what is written there is what appeared on the death certificate of the that, or copy of thereof that we could find somewhere in their clinical records. Those, especially those who unfortunately passed on in our institutions. But the reason we wrote provisional as a cause of death is that we know that the SAPS intends holding inquests for all these deaths. And as a result, where there would be an inquest would confirm the most probable or the actual cause or the most probable cause of death. So the process would wait for inquests to happen, if indeed they are going to happen as is intended, and those we rely on those inquests to determine the cause of death.
How would the police know the actual cause of death
Justice,
without a post-mortem report?
um,
In other words, how would they overcome the description natural cause?
Justice, I think we would leave that to the police, but we would assist with any information or documents that they would require from us as Gauteng Department of Health in doing so, in determining that.
You see, Doc, every time there is a natural cause for death, prima facie, no prosecution. One, no inquest is held. Two, no prosecution ensues. You know that as I do, isn't it?
Yes, I do, Justice.
So if we give a schedule like this from the Ombuds or from you to the police, won't it follow that there will be no possible prosecutions? And that's where the importance of the 35 post-mortem reports come in. Because if in fact there are no post-mortem reports in 118 minus 35, it means in effect there can't be prosecutions, even for starters, in those cases where there are no post-mortem reports. Isn't it so?
Justice, I think that is the whole reason for the SAPS and NPA as involvement in the process, because I suppose, and maybe they should be called to this house to confirm that they are in the process of determining the actual causes of the circumstances of each death and getting as much evidence as possible in each case, individual case, and then probably they would decide, they'd come to a decision whether there would be anybody liable or not, and whether any prosecutions would ensue or not. I think that's the premise that we as a department are holding at the moment.
Will there be somebody who has more detail than you have to help the police? Who else would have more detail of the circumstances of death other than those you have investigated with your team?
Okay. Justice, those individuals, mental health care users who demised within the institute, the hospitals of Gauteng Department of Health, there are clinical records. So there are doctors who saw the patients who in their last days, and there are records. And those records are the ones whose copies we have made available to the SAPS as well. So if the individual doctors who attended to the patients need to be called, I think they would provide more information than I have, because we went according to what they have written.
But let's look at the schedule, Doc. That's a fair answer. But look at the number of people who died in Takalani. Can you see that? People who died at Hepzibah home,
Yes.
Mosego home. Look, the numbers who died at CRC. That might be easier. I don't know. And you go further, look at Precious Angels. So we can see some did indeed die in hospitals under your authority,
Yes.
as HOD, but even more died at NGOs, many, many more. Where would the police find those details of the circumstances of their death?
Justice, that has been indeed our dilemma with the SAPS, and we have held a lot of meetings and interactions, communications with the SAPS in doing so. We have assisted the SAPS by sending our officials to some of these NGOs which are not closed yet, because remember some are closed, to find documents. They don't keep proper clinical records of patients than in proper hospitals, and that has been a challenge. So we have given the SAPS quite a number of records that were written, scanty as they are, from some of the NGOs where we could find records. And I agree with you, Justice, that in quite a number, there were no records at all. So in that case, I interacted with Life Esidimeni management, the managing director, and wrote to him and requested them to make the records that they had of our patients before they were moved from Life Esidimeni to the NGOs, so that at least we could have some record of the individual, even if the last record on the Life Esidimeni information documents would be maybe outdated, would be not so close to the date of death. And Life Esidimeni has cooperated, and they have said the SAPS can give them the list of all those whose records they would like to have, and they would make those records available.
So potentially, Doctor, well, let me start the other end. You can see it's a matter that worries me quite a bit. It, in effect, means who would be responsible for the order that deceased mental health care users be buried without postmortems? And without the consent of their families. Who made that order? Who made that decision?
Yeah. Justice, I would not be able to answer for the management of the NGOs. The deaths that happened in most of 2016. In quite a number of cases that we looked at and inquired and investigated, we found that a person would demise in the NGO. They would call a private doctor to certify, a GP, general practitioner. They would, either with the involvement of the family or not, engage a private undertaker and go on to bury. And that unfortunately happened in quite a number of cases, some of them with family involvement, others not, especially where they claimed that they could not trace families.
And each burial requires at least a, what do they call it, a burial warrant or a burial, isn't it so?
Yes.
Which must set out the course of death, whether natural or unnatural, and normally that will be certified by a doctor.
Yes, Justice, you are correct. And that's why we have been told that in most of the cases, the NGOs had engaged local general practitioners and local funeral undertakers who were cooperating in that process. And normally undertakers do assist families with trips to the Department of Home Affairs to get death certificates and so on. And that's what would happen without knowledge of government.
Counsel?
Thank you, Doctor. Can you just assist these proceedings by giving a clear indication of the number of people who have demised pursuant to this project. What is before these proceedings, and in terms of what the Ombudsman has reported, the number is standing at 118. Can you just assist from the department side as to exactly what is the current position of those who have been affected by this unfortunate tragedy?
Yes, Justice and Counsel. We did not stop with the Ombudsman's report in working together with and I should stress this, together with representatives of the families in working, in tracking each and every one of the patients who were in institutions and those who also died. Subsequent to February the 1st, when the Ombudsman released his report, up till end of September, there were deaths that happened in February, in the month of February itself, in March and so on until now. And a total of 23 deaths have happened in the 8 months from February to date. Or let me say till the end of September.
Justice, I beg leave to hand up a document which gave detail of the number. If I can also make copies available to my colleagues. Doctor, there are two lists which have just been handed over. Can you just give a description of the two lists, as it appears that on the one list, which is comprised of 2 pages, it goes up to number 118, and the other sheet comprised of a list up to 23. Can you just explain like the two lists in terms of how you arrive at what the total number of death is to date?
Justice, yes, if we add the number of 118 that had happened, let me say, by 1st of February, and the 23 that have happened in the 8 months from the 1st of February till end of September, the number becomes 141.
You have to say that again, Dr. Kinosi.
Okay, Justice, thank you. If we add the deaths that have happened in various places where the patients are now housed, from February, from 8 months from February till end of September, the 43, we added to the 118 that had happened until the 1st of February. The number becomes 23 plus 118 is 141. So 141 of the former Life Esidimeni mental health care users have now demised if we continue to check them on.
Goodness.
Yes.
So the 23 we ought to add to, let's start, you are happy with 118. That's a good number. That's an accurate number.
Yes, Justice, I agree with the number of 118 till end of January 2017.
And to that cohort, we should add 23 people who would have demised between February and September 2016.
2017.
2017, I beg your pardon.
Yes,
And
I agree.
they too were mental health care users at Esidimeni at the time of the marathon project.
You are correct, Justice.
So the actual tally then on your evidence is 141 people who have died.
Yes, Justice. The numbers were different. They all passed on because of natural causes. Most of them passed on after being referred to our acute hospitals, and we know the causes of death in, or the provisional, if I may call it, before postmortems of most of them. Most of them have had postmortems because it was when we are aware of their illnesses, and their illnesses, obviously I may not disclose diagnosis of individual patients publicly. I'm not allowed to do so.
Sure.
But we know that they varied from pneumonia to kidney failure to even pancreatic cancer in one case. So we do know what have happened to them.
But they are part of the original cohort associated with Life Esidimeni, and they've died in the last 8 months.
And that is correct, Justice.
Very well. May continue, Counsel.
Thank you for your assistance, Doctor. May we then move to the recommendations which were specific to the Provincial Department of Health, and those appear from page 11 of the status report. Are you able to get to that?
Yes, Justice.
In this regard, the Gauteng Department of Health, in respect of the first specific recommendation to them, was that there has to be the development of information system with patient registers. Can you just give an account of what the department has done in order to address this aspect?
Yes, Justice and Counsel. The Department of Health considers seriously the keeping of accurate, reliable records of all nature. And because up to now we rely on hard copy records, including patients' files, patients' medical records, which get lost, get misplaced, and so on. Even though we have strengthened systems around even the hard copies themselves, the department has taken a decision that we need to have electronic patient records. And we have taken serious steps within this financial year to plan for implementation when in the new financial year, when we have budgeted for it. We have set up a body of experts, an advisory committee of experts in healthcare and in e-health, and we have completed specifications for such a system to ensure that in all our institutions, from our clinics right through all the hospitals, including our tertiary hospitals, we have electronic patient records. We are publishing before the end of October a request for information to the industry to get a good idea, using the specifications that we have developed, to get a good idea about the availability of those systems in this country. We know that they exist because there are some hospitals, especially in the private sector, that do have electronic patient records throughout. And then RFI will be published soon, and that will give us a good information about how much we will request from Treasury for us to go out on a request to the industry, including pricing, to install this as early as possible in the new financial year. But in the meantime, we have tightened the management of our hard copy records at all levels, not only for our mental health care patients, but also for all patients in our primary health care services and also in our specialized and regular hospitals.
Thank you, Doctor. The second recommendation is that there has to be adherence to the Mental Health Act and its related regulations. How do you give an account in relation to that?
That's correct. The department has since March this year involved experts from National Department of Health, and we've also involved our specialist psychiatrists and mental health care practitioners to assess all the services that we provide in our district health care services. We have looked at all vacant posts. We have and filled them. We have held training sessions for all our healthcare workers on the Mental Health Care Act and its regulations, and also on guidelines on management of NGOs in the province. And we are confident that we have really strengthened mental health care services in the province in the last 8 months.
Let's proceed to recommendation 3, that the district health services capacitation to ensure adherence to regulations and to provide clinical support to the non-governmental organizations.
I think over and above what I've just said, we have engaged with the NGOs, and we have the MEC, myself, and other senior managers held sessions in June and July with managers and owners of all the NGOs where in which our mental health care patients are housed. And we engaged with them and supported them. Teams from, multidisciplinary teams from the department go and visit each and every one of the NGOs that we have contracted, and to look at standards, to assist them as well to get properly licensed, and what they need to be licensed, and we support them. But we don't only do that, we also, on a regular basis, examine the patients, the mental health care users in those NGOs, to make sure that they are well clothed, well nourished, and well taken care of. And that if any of them gets ill, is referred quickly to our acute hospitals. So we have, we are continuously doing that, Justice.
Dr. Genosi, you know that after this tragedy, the national DG, yourself, and others went out there to go and look at these NGOs. All 27 of them failed the legislative requirements. All of them. It's so in the Ombuds report, and the national DG told us so. How many people are at NGOs still? That's the one part of the question. The other part is, of the 23 who died between February and September, how many died at NGO? Do we know? It's no trick question. The question is, are we still having our NGOs now up to scratch? Will they pass the test, which they failed resoundingly? In other words, are mental health care users safe where they are now?
Justice, I think you've asked me two questions,
Yes.
and I'll start with the first one. You asked about the 27 NGOs cited in the Ombudsman's report. And I think the wording of the findings and the recommendations of the Ombudsman was that those 27 were not all were not properly licensed and inadequate. When immediately after the Ombudsman's report, the National Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, put up a team of 60 experts who examined each and every one of the 27, and they came up with an initial report which we confirmed as Gauteng Department of Health when we sent our team, multidisciplinary team of experts, that it was not a homogeneous group of 27 who were all equally bad. Yes, the licenses that they had received may have been improper licensed, so they may not have been properly licensed. They had licenses, but whether the licenses were valid or not was in question. And I think that's one thing that the Ombudsman mentioned. The physical conditions within each one of them also varied widely. Some of them, all they needed was, they didn't have proper occupation certificates, zoning certificates, so it was issue of documentation, whilst others were so bad that we had to remove patients immediately to save patients' lives. So there was a range. This is what I'm trying to the ministerial team of experts, which included psychiatrists, social workers, and mental health care specialists and environmental health practitioners, who we used to call health inspectors in the past, were part of the teams, both the national team and the Gauteng departmental team. And as a result, our aim was to remove each and every one of the patients who were in the 27. The department, working with National Department of Health as well, and psychiatrists, but also working with the representatives of the families of the former life Esidimeni patients, we managed to move 850 mental health care users within 3 months, from the 3rd of March until the 31st of May. So in those months of March, April, and May, we moved 850 mental health care users to safer facilities. Not all 820 were, did I say, I should correct myself if I put another number, 820.
I see.
And not all 820 were former life Esidimeni patients, I should state. Only 750 of the 820 were former life Esidimeni patients. The other 70 happened to be patients who were in those NGOs long before the life Esidimeni saga, but because we regarded those NGOs not as safe at the moment, we also relocated those mental health care users as well to safer facilities. I should state that there are still 31 mental health care users who were former life Esidimeni patients who remain in various NGOs, and for only one reason, Justice, the reason that their relatives did not want their loved ones to be moved. we even went to an extent of developing a form which the families could fill to say to us that we don't really want this, my loved one. I'm happy where he is, and I don't want him to be moved again. It has been moved. It has been. The statement has been made that moving of mental health care users numerous times is not safe for them as well. So we did not remove any user without the approval of the family member. So all those other 850, we took effort working with the families committee to ensure that the family member of that particular mental care user is aware that we are now moving the person from this NGO to this particular facility.
Well, you'd have to decide whether it's 820 or 850.
We moved 820, so
820.
820 includes those that were not former Life Esidimeni patients, but who had never been to Life Esidimeni facilities, but we found them in these NGOs.
Remember where we are,
Yes.
Dr. Kiloshi, we are on item 3, and you reporting on what you have done in relation to NGOs. And the
Yes.
conclusion there that you're doing a lot and your NGO managers are being advised and staff on quality patient care.
Yes.
So the second part of my question was, how many mental health care users now are still at NGOs? You know what happened with the tragedy? How
Yes.
you cleaned up? You've told us about that. And you told us about those who want to be there and did not give consent to be moved. I understand that. But as a total population of mental health care users, how many are being cared for in NGOs currently?
Can I ask for clarity, Justice? You mean not only former Life Esidimeni patients,
No.
all those in NGOs? The number.
I've got the numbers on Life Esidimeni, and thank you for
Yes.
that. I want to get a sense of, the recommendation is go out there and clean up NGO facilities in generic terms. So your report says, yes, you have been doing that. The inevitable question is, how many mental health care users are still at NGOs in a generic sense?
Okay. Justice, the number that I have is 5,184, and I need to qualify that number. The number, just like numbers in any particular institution or hospital, will change from day to day because patients get admitted, patients get discharged. So the last count was 5,184. I should also qualify that these NGOs are not run by Gauteng Department of Health alone. Quite a number of these NGOs are co-licensed by both Department of Social Development and Gauteng Department of Health. There is a Gauteng Department of Social Development. So we work together with social development in managing these NGOs and also ensuring that our patients in those NGOs are safe.
There's no lacking tragedy there.
We have, since March this year, Justice formed a team, an interdepartmental team of practitioners from Gauteng Department of Health and Gauteng Department of Social Development. And this team has developed a tool that they use to inspect each and every NGO in its totality, and also in assessing the patients, the users in those facilities as well. And this team has made tremendous strides. They may not have, in the 8 months, visited each and every one of them. They are continuing their in phases, but they've visited most of them, I should report.
The last part of the question is how many of those who died, of the 23 who died at NGOs?
Justice, I would have to count from the list that has been submitted as record. And the list of the 23 in the column on the far right has got the heading place of death. And, but also there is a column that says facility registered at, in other words, where the user was at that time. There's a column that says facility registered at. You'll see that there's Kalafong, the first one, there's Shama House, there's Anchor House, Mosejo, the Shama House, Mosejo, and Takalani, and yeah, those those are the NGOs. So I've marked those who demised in NGOs. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 that I can count.
I see. I realize you didn't need spectacles to look at those small numbers.
Oh, well, I've got one with a bigger font.
Oh, I see you've got one with a bigger font.
Lucky,
Oh, that's where the trick is. This is
yeah.
very, very small, Council. But
Okay.
be that as it may, it looks like there's still,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
most
6,
of them
7.
appear to be regular institutions, isn't it?
Yeah, most of them, only 7 of the 23 passed on in an NGO. The rest, that is 16, passed on in our state hospitals.
Are receiving mental health care in state hospitals.
That's
Very
right.
well, thank you.
Thank you,
Council?
Justice.
Thank you. It really appears that indeed your team, together with the national government, are doing a great job in the implementation. Let's now move to recommendation number 4, the deinstitutionalization of the mental health care users implemented with provision of structured community mental health care services. What has the provincial government done in order to meet this recommendation?
Community health care services have been strengthened, especially with a decision by the Department of Health, Gauteng Department of Health, to make sure that within each district, as you know, Gauteng has got 5 districts, there would be a psychiatrist appointed in each of the districts to head the team of mental health care practitioners in each district, so that those who are discharged from our mental health institutions and are continuing to be cared for as outpatients are taken care of by qualified professionals in each institution. We have so far managed to, after advertisement, attracted 2 psychiatrists. So 2 districts have got psychiatrists. The others, we are still recruiting. But it doesn't mean that there's no care there. We've strengthened the mental health care practitioners, that is the nurses mental health care nurses, psychiatric nurses in those. But we have taken a decision, instead of having a 13-person mental health review board that is stationed in head office like it used to be in the past, the review board now has 25 members, 5 per district. And the decision we've taken is that they are not going to be housed at head office, but they would be housed in the district in which they are appointed, whether it's Tshwane, Ekurhuleni, Esidimeni, Johannesburg, or Westland. The mental health care review board people will be stationed there so that they can be closer to the services, closer to the clinics where our outpatients take their medication and are assessed, and can even visit them at their homes.
Are the review boards full-time? Are members of the review board full-time?
And Justice, no, they are not, but they have to give us a certain number of hours per week, and indeed per day, each one of them.
Are they paid?
Yes, Justice, they are paid.
And of course, they have to exercise their duties in accordance with the law, with the statute.
Yes, their duties, their appointment of mental health review boards is in the statutes, in both the Act and the regulations, and there are also guidelines of how they should function, and what type of person can be appointed by the MEC in the case of provinces to be in that board. So they all. An advertisement was published. People responded with their CVs. The advertisement said what type of person can apply, and the interviews were held, and that's how they were all appointed as board members. So they all have some knowledge, qualification, or experience or other in mental health care to be appointed in that position.
Council?
Thank you for that accounting. Let's then proceed to recommendation number 5, which requires specialist-run community psychiatry services.
Justice, I think in answering a previous question, I have answered this one as well, so
Yes.
I would be repeating myself.
Yes, indeed, you have.
Okay, thank you.
Then can we then conclude by dealing with the last aspect of the recommendation, that the Gauteng Department of Health must develop a capacity program for all newly established non-governmental organizations?
Yes. Thank you, Council. Justice, the department has set up a team that works with all the 129 NGOs with which we are contracted. And there is a number of NGOs that we have contracted, and we are paying to keep our loved ones, and they take care of them. We have set standards. We have shared with them the tool that we use to assess an NGO before we license it. We have trained them on what they need to have, including documentation, not only the structure, the preparation of food in their NGOs, the cleanliness, the layout of the facility, so that our users can walk freely and have exercise and not be confined to spaces. But also it sets out the personnel that they need to have, the professionals and the carers who take care of them. So we have trained them on that, and we go to the extent of assisting them, even if they have to get documentation from the local authorities, from the municipalities and the city authorities for rezoning and occupation certificates and so on. So, and we have had, I have personally engaged with them and the managers as well, and fielded questions from them, and we have given them our numbers so they can contact us at any one time. And these are the owners and managers of all these NGOs.
Very good. Council, do you have any more questions?
Thank you, Doctor. Like, it really appears that like a lot of work has been done in response to the recommendations, which are being taken seriously. Thank you for having given the account in the manner that you did. There are no further questions, Justice.
Thank you,
Is there
Council.
any theoretical tension between deinstitutionalization and community health care?
Justice,
Your colleague, the national DG, almost suggested that there was a difference.
yes, Justice, we do have, not all mental health care users need to be institutionalized. They are, because the functioning of various, in other words, there are various levels of functioning of mental health care users. And there are those that can be taken care of at home, and actually there are lots of them, and who get, some of them are even employed, and they get their outpatient medication from our clinics, our hospitals, and so on, and they are checked on a regular basis. Those are the community services, mental health care services that we provide. And whenever they need to be hospitalized, they would be hospitalized for that time if they've got an acute illness or exacerbation, and they will be discharged when they are stabilized. Those are the services that we provide at community level. Deinstitutionalization, as far as I know, and this is actually documented, and even the World Health Organization and other organizations have got documents and guidelines on this. This is where, in cases where patients have been taken care of in institutions, need to be taken care of in homes, either daycare centers or residential homes like NGOs, and what guideline, what needs to be looked at, the capacity of those NGOs, what kind of patient can be sent to those residential community facilities, and what should not be done. So there are guidelines, and there is a process. There are processes for deinstitutionalization, where instead of people being taken care of by the state, being taken care of by community structures. And as I said, NGOs can be either residential, where people are housed and sleep there, and there are those that are daycare centers. In the evenings, they go back to their individual homes, and during the day, they come and be taken care of whilst their relatives are engaged elsewhere, go to work and so on.
Thank you. Dr. Kenosi. Council Hassan, it's your turn.
Thank you, Justice Masaneke. Good morning, Dr. Kenosi.
Good morning, Council.
I'm representing the families of 55 deceased. Can I begin with a question regarding the numbers? You started off your testimony this morning speaking about 118 and then subsequently produced an Excel spreadsheet with 23 additional names and inform us now that it's 141 deaths, in fact. Are you certain that this is the correct number as you sit here?
Council, yes. I don't work alone. We've got a team, and we keep record of where each one of our patients are, what happens to them, and of course, if there are any deaths that happen, unfortunately, we do keep records of them, and those are the deaths that we have records of.
But we've seen in this saga, the result of the Marathon Project, that it's been very difficult, in fact, to establish the exact number of deaths. It keeps changing. If it's so simple, if the patient records are there, why do the numbers keep changing?
Yes, it hasn't been easy. I agree with you, Council, especially going back into history, going into last year, to come to where we are with numbers. It was, we really had to work hard at that. But I should say that since February, March, where we know where each and every one of our mental health care users are, it has become easier this time in the last 18 months. From the lessons we've learned.
And who is responsible for compiling the numbers? Who is responsible for double-checking, making sure that every death is included in the list for the purposes of these proceedings?
Council, I have personally written to all chief executive officers of institutions to report the admission, the discharge, and death of each and every one of these patients. And the hospitals report not only to myself, but to the Directorate Mental Health Care and at the head office, but also report to, so they report at different levels, to the Directorate Mental Health Care Services in the head office, to the DDG, the Deputy Director General, responsible for clinical services, and to myself.
You see, the concern of the families is that there's been such dysfunction. This whole process has been characterized by dysfunction leading to death. And the families need to be reassured that what is going to take place now is going to be managed very, very tightly. So you say that you've written to the CEOs of the institutions to get information from them regarding deaths. Are you saying, therefore, you've got your hand on the steering wheel? You are the one who is keeping the list, double-checking the list, and making sure it's accurate?
Council, as acting head of department and accounting officer, I would say yes, ultimately I should take responsibility for the accuracy of the information, and I do take steps to do so. As far as I can go, the statistics that I have given are correct.
And the CEOs of these institutions that you've written to, are they the NGOs?
Can you...
Who have you written to? You say you've written to the CEOs,
to the CEOs of hospitals.
Of hospitals.
Of hospitals, sorry, to the Council.
But what about the deaths in the NGOs?
As I've said, Council, the mental health units in each and every district interact with each and every one of the NGOs at that level. So within the district, each district manager knows the NGOs that are within that district, Ekurhuleni, Tshwane, and so on. They've got a team that goes with them and interact, and anything that happens, they also go and see the patients on a regular basis within the NGO, and the NGO owners or managers have been trained to report any illness of any NGO, either immediately refer them to the nearest hospital as soon as possible, and this is what happens. And if any deaths unfortunately happen before referral, but also to report it. And so far, we have had cooperation from the NGOs as well.
And can I just, what you've just described, you say this is as a matter of course, the protocol, that the district managers are in control, they know that they're in contact with the NGOs, they're alerted as to illnesses and so on. You're saying that is, and that they're trained to do so. The NGOs are trained to do so, to provide the information. You're saying that is, as a matter of course, this has always been the system.
Council, yes. And if there is any dereliction of duty that I'm not aware of, I think one would need to know about it and correct it as far as possible.
I'm not sure whether I am misunderstanding you, but we're here because there has been a dereliction of duty. And because the NGOs have not complied, and because the officials who are responsible for the oversight of the NGOs, for licensing the NGOs, and for monitoring the health of the mental health care users have also failed in their duties. So I'm concerned that relying on the same system that has been in place all along in order to fix what's happened is not really going to get us anywhere. Would you agree?
Council, yes, if we relied on the same systems and we didn't change anything, obviously the way we work, then obviously we would probably get the same bad results. But as I say, the report of the Ombudsman since I came to head office in February, the recommendations made in them and implementing the recommendations, but also doing more than that in some of which, the ways in which I've described already. We are hoping to change the outcome in the cases of all our mental health care users. And the results indeed show that the care of our patients in the NGOs and in our own institutions has improved a lot in the last 6 to 8 months.
So my questions are in relation to the numbers.
Okay.
There's clearly a lot of work to be done, as you say, in relation to the system and improving things. My concern and my question that I'm putting to you is whether you are satisfied that the system that you have implemented to determine the exact number of deaths is suitable.
Council, I will say yes. So far, it's working. It's not a one-man system. It's a teamwork that we do, and we have 2 bodies now that are forever looking at what we do as a department. Not only the Mental Health Care Review Board, which is statutory, but as a department, we have retained the services of the Families Committee that has been that represents the families of all our mental care users. That we work with them, and they have formed the eyes of the community, and correct us and make suggestions, and also make sure that we as a department do the right thing. So we work with them as well to check on us, but also to assist us in providing the best care possible.
You see, I appreciate also that there has to be teams. This can't be done by one person, but one person has to be responsible ultimately for the list. And that's why I'm putting these questions to you and these concerns to you, is to say, who is the one person that is responsible for the list, that parties can communicate with, and that parties can hold to account for the accuracy of the list?
Okay. If we have to point at one person, Council, then you can point at me as accounting officer of the department.
So we've only been provided with this list now in the last 45 minutes, these spreadsheets. So we will take our time and go through it carefully. But on a cursory examination, we see that there's at least one repeat name. And that is on your on the big list, the list of 118.
The 118.
The 118,
Yes.
yeah. There are two documents. One is the 23 and the other is the 118. I'm referring to the list of 118. I mean, my print is quite small. Do you see number 49?
The list that I have is not numbered. Oh, this one, thanks. I need spectacles now.
The person who
Justice, I
chose the
don't-
font must be
Yeah,
charged and
yeah.
jailed for life.
Okay.
Okay.
Is your list not numbered?
Yeah,
You do.
the big one that I can see hasn't got numbers. The
Okay.
patients are not numbered. And the one that is numbered is just,
It's
I think
impossible
this
to
must
see.
be font size 6 I can, or 5. Sorry about that.
If you
But-
look at
but-
number 49,
49 is what, Mark Kofela or something. What is that?
yeah, it looks like
49.
Motofela Lehwabe.
Lekwabe Matofela, yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
And then if you look at
7105, yeah, okay.
okay.
I'm just waiting for the witness to be
Marco,
with us.
Yes. Thank you.
You see it now?
Yes. Is it?
That's 49.
Is it Macapella?
Motofela Lehwabe.
Oh,
Number 49,
Oh, yeah, ke Motofela
male,
Lekwabe.
7105 ID number, 70105 106.
sure. Maybe if you can assist me on this one. Okay. Which one? Yeah,
But which,
what's the name for it?
while they're doing that,
49?
Council, which
Which
other
is the other
number-
one? It's
Which
number-
other number is?
Number
Yes.
87, it's on the same page, it's the very last entry on that page.
Okay,
Number
let me-
87.
Let me sorry, just wait.
It's the same person, it's just that the names are swapped around. So instead of Motofela
that's
Lehwabe,
49.
it's Lehwabe Motofela, the same ID number.
Yeah, 77105. No? Yeah, and then
And are they both Kalinin?
which one is? I go to the next page.
They're both Cullinan.
Care Center?
And then which one is this? And then number 49 and what other number, council?
87.
87 on the same list. Seven one five six eight. Kalinen Rehab. Mutufela Lewa.
So there's an error in this spelling of one. It seems like a typo because there's one letter that's different, but everything else. And both at Cullinan.
49. Is it 51, not 49?
Pardon me? 49?
49, okay. Yes, I can see that, Council. Difference, well, the surnames are spelled differently.
The surnames are, but the date of death is the same.
Yeah.
Do you see the date of death?
Yes,
Same.
yes. I see the date of death on the, at 87, at 87.
So, this is my question. Are these two different people who just happen to share a lot of things in common, or?
We will look into that, Council. I'll have to look at this and compare it with the list that I have.
Does this appear to be a repeat name to you?
118. Yes. Council, we will look into that. The surnames are spelled differently, but we will look into that. I think that's all I can say at the moment.
That's fair. After, after the adjournment, I think the HOD can come back and provide an explanation,
Okay, thanks.
if any.
87.
I'd like to also point out that earlier on in these proceedings, the list that was provided by the Ombud, the expanded list that was provided by the Ombud, we pointed out that 11 of the 11 of the people we represent and their families were not on the list. And we see that on this new list, the 23 that have been added, that there remain 4 of our clients who are still missing from that list. So that's not accurate. What I'm putting to you is that this list is not accurate. And I'd like to know how you suggest we ensure the accuracy of this list going forward.
The list is as accurate as it can be with the information that we have, Council. And if there are any recorded deaths that we don't know of, we should be told about them. There were interactions, I think, before this between our offices and the ombuds on a particular list of patients given by Section 27 to him. And we found that 5 of the 9 names that he gave that he had said are not our list were actually on our list as well. So 5 names coincided with ours. The other 4 were people who demised before the control period of October 2015 till his report, the Ombuds report. So they are also on our list, but they were just before the control period for the terms of reference of the ADR process, but they are on our list as well.
And the Ombud said the same thing, and since then there's been a reconciliation, audit of the list to reconcile those anomalies to see whether they do in fact fall within the control period, and the Ombud has confirmed that apart from 1, I think they all do fall within the control period. So I think, again, I'm putting it to you that there are different people involved in this process of determining the accuracy of the list.
Did the Ombud confirm to Council outside the proceedings? Remember we had agreed on a process where you would provide him with the list that you had
Yes,
of exclusions, in other words.
that's correct.
That happened,
That's correct.
and what was the outcome?
He subsequently emailed the parties with notes in relation to each of those 11 that we had put to him, and discussed the circumstances of their death.
So is there some report that that I will see at some time that reflects the reconciliation?
I'm advised that the Ombud has said that he would provide a written report to you, Justice Masaneke.
I had asked for one, for obvious reasons.
Yes.
We're all searching for accuracy.
Yes.
And that's the reconciliation which should be given to the HOD. So that when, in his further evidence, he must, seek to buttress or otherwise amend his numbers in light of what the Ombud says. And he could interact with the Ombud so that we can get,
Indeed.
for me, it must be accuracy.
Indeed.
And everybody who's entitled to be in must be in. Those who are not, we should know so.
Indeed.
Very well. So we're very close to, we are at tea break now, a minute before tea break. We'll have to find counsel, the Ombud, your witness, say he owes me a report of reconciliation, which I believe counsel have seen and I have not seen. If you could send me a report with the outcome of that deliberation with the parties. And that report should also be made available to the HOD so that when he comes back, after tea, then then there will be further, of course, examination around issues of accuracy.
Okay, thank you.
In so, Justice.
Okay, thank you. Council, it's 11:30. This is the time as good as any to adjourn, is it not?
As good as any.
Yeah. Very well. We're going to adjourn until 12 o'clock.